Welcome back to another episode of Meredith with a Y. I'm your host, Meredith Willits, with my almost like we're like almost co-hosts at this point. Like I'm here for this. My co-host-ish, if she'll have me, Alison McGuire. And today we're going to actually tap back into what we talked about last week, which is gender roles in parenting, gender roles and how they're morphing and changing and what that means and what it looks like in families. And so stay with us. Hello, everyone. This is Meredith with a Y, and I am your host, Meredith Willits. Today, we are going to go deep, changing lives, and I am giving you the keys to the castle. Thank you for having me, Alison McGuire.
I accept your invitation.
I'm like, this is a sidebar from our topic today, but like literally, I'm like, do I change the name of the podcast? Does she really want to do this? Does she want to be involved in this? Do we start a whole new podcast? Because I don't know if I can go back to just doing it by myself. Like you kind of have sucked me into a situation where I'm not sure I want to go back to the old way. And so yeah, so I appreciate you so much doing this with me, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, me too. I love it. I was actually just talking to my friend Allie this morning on the phone. She's like, what are you doing today? I was like, oh, recording with Meredith. She's like, oh, you're like doing it now. Like you guys are doing it together now, like permanently. I was like, well, I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, it's fun. We love it. So
It
here
is
I am.
fun. It is fun. It's almost like girl talk where we just kind of like focus a little bit more, you know what I mean? Instead of talking trash about our spouses or whatever. We kind of get to talk about topics that we're passionate about, and you and I are very much in line with like spirituality and like just really focusing in on topics and nuances. So I think this has been, for me anyways, it's been super fun, and I like the fact that I'm able to kind of check into that other part of my brain, because when I'm doing this by myself, I wholly have to keep the podcast going. I wholly have to stay on topic, which is super, what is it, left brain, right? It's super the logical, it's the focused part of your brain. But when I'm doing it with you, I'm able to tap into that right part of imagination brain where I can like release the reins of making sure that I'm not jumping from topic to topic, which I probably sometimes do anyways. But it's nice to have someone to kind of keep me on the road, so to speak. So, and I'm excited to talk about this again today. Unfortunately, and we both said it last week, after we hit stop recording, we ended up having like another 20-minute conversation and Allison's like, we should have not hit stop recording. I know,
Yeah.
because it was good stuff.
Yeah. We just went off. We were like, and this, and that,
I
and
know.
this. So we'll get back into that today.
And we're seeing so much like in society. And I saw this great video the other day, like there's this huge topic right now of like Target and their LGBTQ plus clothing line or whatever. I haven't even been to Target and I can't tell you how long, but not because I'm boycotting, just because I don't shop. And so there's a lot of people like up in arms. And this video was so fantastic because the woman was showing the clothes back in the 80s that girls and boys and men wore, like circa Miami Vice, where the boys wore nothing but light turquoise and peach and pink and white. And yeah, and it was like, it was very in line with what they're selling, quote, at Target as their LGBTQ plus clothing line. And she was just like, "Yeah, look at all these people we were indoctrinating back in the '80s." And it's ridiculously true. I mean, men have been wearing skirts for years, wigs for years, makeup for years, be it to whiten their face as a judge, or actors and actresses. Like, I think that the gender roles are more fluid than we would like to believe, and I think the focus of gender, quote, roles as being norms of society and veering from them as being a negative or against family values is actually a concept that has been born that didn't exist necessarily in the past. I mean, if you look at the animal kingdom, like there's roles of fluidity across species. If you look at our past and our, pink originally was a boy color. Not until the recent pink has become a girl color. And so I think when we look at gender roles and the way that they play out in families and children and in fashion and all of these different things, I kind of feel like we've actually jumped into a box and
I
now we're
was just gonna
trying.
say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now it's like we're trying to get out of the box, and I was
Yeah.
watching something the other day where, women used to work, and women did all of the stuff in World War II. They worked in the factories, they were building tanks, and then they kind of switched it over to the beaver cleaver, where the woman wears the apron and meets her husband at the door with a drink and the kids, and she puts on her face of makeup before her husband comes home. Like, it almost is like women were part of the process, and then women were the process where when men went to war, and then it was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, stop the clock. Women are getting way too independent and too much power, so we're gonna put them back in the kitchen. We're going to tell them that they're hysterical, that they need to be on Quaaludes," like, the whole thing, we're gonna put them back in the kitchen and tell them that being a demure housewife is where it's at and to take care of the kids in the home. So we're gonna revert to that, which I can't even say the word revert. We're going to invent that
Yeah.
role.
Yeah.
Think about that. We're going to invent the role of the woman in the home.
Mhm.
Maybe revert back to antebellum times and, like, European times where a woman wore the corset and all that stuff. But even then, she wasn't, like, cooking and cleaning in the house, she had servants. So, like, we're kind of inventing these roles, and now we're trying to uninvent the roles, and we think that we're, like, doing something, but are we? Are we just undoing something that was invented based on trying to keep women out of power?
Mhm. I think that when you start to really unpack it, you start to live it, like, you've been kind of like we talked about a couple episodes ago, you've been, kind of living multiple roles, you get to try on these roles, you get to see what they feel like. It's very different than maybe the media would portray, right? Because I think what we're talking about when we're saying like, what's been invented, it's like this persona or this box that's been like created, made, painted that we all look at and we're like, okay, this is what it means to be this kind of person. And this is what it means to be a man. This is what it means to be a woman. This is what it means to be anything, right? Like we have all these labels, which our human brains do really well with labels. It like
Mm,
helps us identify and quantify things. It helps us easily say this means that, this has that nuance. It's like a quick hit. And then I think it's so easy to get so caught in. And I really do think like when I see people making large displays out of, being a man or a woman and kind of like going against that grain, I think to myself sometimes, if we didn't have these boxes that were so tightly bound, would we feel the need? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, doing that. I'm just saying, like, it's almost like a teenager that rebels because they have such a restrictive parent.
1,000.
Like, would it, like, if we just said, like, it's okay for, you know, anyone to like anything, it's okay for you to like blur the lines, would we feel such a need to be so
To push against.
yeah, like, make such a production out of things or just judge everything so much, and, it's almost like how in Europe where, it's normal to have a little bit of a glass of wine with dinner when you're a kid,
Yeah,
right? Like, it's totally normal. They don't have the kind of alcoholism and the drinking problems that we do because we've made it so, such a
push it.
thing.
Yeah.
It's that same kind of concept, I feel like when and I've lived it, I'm sure you have too, you see the box, you step out of the box, and you feel like by stepping out of that box, you are being rebellious or there's something wrong with you.
Well, if you look to Christianity, which is probably where most of these concepts and rules come from, because if you look at like a fundamentalist, so like I did a stint as a fundamentalist Baptist for about 5 minutes based on this controlling, bullying relationship that I was in. So I did a stint as this, in this bad relationship. And I was introduced by way of this abusive man to fundamentalist Christian values, which women wear skirts, women grow their hair long, women are, take care of the kids. And if you do anything against those values, and there's a litany of them, you are literally going against God. Like a woman's hair is her glory, like all these things are steeped in traditional Christian fundamentalist values that the opposite of those are anti God. Right? So if you think about when we're looking at women working outside of the home, women wearing pants, men wearing skirts, whatever it is, right? Gender fluidity. What we're really saying is you are doing something that is out of line with religious law. Like where else is this coming from? This isn't coming from like the indigenous because most natives either wore a loincloth, which would be considered like not enough clothes, or a skirt, like some sort of tie wrap around. Like, where do these things come from? Like, and if you go to India, it's an honor to shave your head in honor of the person in your family that's died, right? But here, it's like if a woman were to shave her head, she's going against God. So all of these things that we're talking about basically are make believe. Let's be clear. Any
Yeah. Well,
sort
they're
of
human made, right? Like, this is
yes.
not like this is a human made controlled, spin on things.
Right,
That's
and
where
if
we're
you
at.
right, and if you go against them, you are unsavory. You're an unsavory woman, you're an unsavory man, and, will be shunned accordingly. I was thinking about, like, the trans ban that they're doing in Florida, and they're trying to get it to be done in Texas now in some weird way, and I was like, "What if everyone who was, against these sorts of laws, like, what if all men decided for 1 month to wear a dress to work, all men, and all women decided to wear a suit and tie. Like, think of that kind of energy of that, first of all, that revolt, right? That, like, I'm going to take a stand and dress like a man, I'm gonna dress like a woman, whatever that means. Are they gonna arrest all of them? Like, think about the idea that if you put paint on your face, like, that is could be considered against the law. Like, it's interesting. It's so stupid. It's unbelievable how stupid it is. It
Yeah.
makes no sense. But if everyone did it, if everyone was like, "We're not doing this," like, what are they gonna say? Like, "Women can't work, you need to take care of your kids." Like, this is that they're coming from for you. Like, even though you fall into a certain gender role, do you? You work outside of the home. Do you?
Yeah. Well,
You
I
know?
think, like, to bring it back to, like, a personal level too, like, having with your experience that you've recently have, like, right now, you're back in your housewife role, right? So to
Yep,
speak, if we were to call it something,
yep,
and you just came from what would be considered a much more masculine role, and you have been kind of toggling back and forth between those things, like, what would you say like, on a personal level, having experienced those 2 pieces? Like, what do you feel like you've been like, what glimmers have you gotten from that? Like, what do you feel like you've learned? Like, what do you feel like how's it expanded you? I'd be curious to know that because I think it's really and the reason I'm kind of, like, wrapping it back to that is because I think
yeah,
it's really easy to sit here and talk about, like, society as a whole or about other people and other people's experiences, and then when you experience something for yourself, it is a completely different ball game. Like,
yeah.
from the sense of fully understanding something, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean?
Well, I find some of the things that are very interesting about being in that very masculine role at the island. So I'm in charge of, in any one day, between two, three, six guys. And there's only me as the only female at at our house. And I'm directing traffic. I'm focusing attention to what's being done next. I'm financing all of it, all the labor, all the purchase of materials. The only thing that I'm not is kind of the know-how. Like, I know what I know, and I do what I know how to do, but
And you're doing physical labor.
and physical labor and mental labor and hauling and stuff. When I'm in that role as a boss and in a masculine role of construction, if you will, I am very much in the on the inside of, male jokes, kind of tomfoolery, if you wanna call it that. I'm looked at like one of the guys. I don't do my hair. I literally wake up however it is, throw it in like a ponytail, like, don't even brush it, throw on some deodorant and brush my teeth, and I'm out the door. Like, I don't sexualize myself when I'm walking into this realm of men that I'm seeing as being partners.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't find I find myself kind of like, well, they're not wearing makeup, they're not doing their hair, they're just throwing on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and showing up, and, like, I kind of fall into that as well. Like, it's it's interesting because 'cause I'll, like, tell him, like, "Hey, coffee's on in the morning. If you get here early, come over and have coffee, and we'll just, like, sit around and talk about all sorts of different topics." And I think the lines get really interestingly blurred, especially being out in nature,
Yeah.
right? There's no social norms to remind us, like, you should be wearing heels today.
Mhm.
Like when you walk into an office building, there's protocol. Okay. When you are in nature, all protocol is off the table. Everyone's hands get dirty. Everyone jumps in and helps. Everyone is dressing for the temperature, the sun, the rain, whatever. And so I'm finding it interesting now that I'm talking about it that certain norms are created by way of setting. And when we
Yeah.
remove that setting, then kind of all of that is off the table. You know what I mean? Like
So interesting.
appropriateness to wear to school, appropriateness to wear to work, appropriateness to wear to church is completely removed in the setting that I am in because there's nothing but nature.
Yeah. It's like a construct that's placed upon versus the construct that you're in, I guess you could say, has been removed, right? So there's fluidity in where you are, and it's just there's no quote unquote rules for that. So you
There's
get to make your own rules.
Yeah, there's no rules, there's no expectation. There's no like, "Oh, well, you didn't dress up today." It's like, "No shit, I'm outside in the yard digging in mud." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, but, like, if you think about it, the society has set up, like, a judge wears whatever the
Cloak
black
or
cloak
whatever.
is, whatever,
Yeah.
right? And you dress for that venue, and a prisoner wears an orange jumpsuit, and a lawyer wears a suit. So if you go outside of those boundaries of what is the norm and what is expected, my brain explodes. But when you
Mhm.
go back to nature and you're like, camping in the wild or going for a walk, that all those rules are removed. So, like, if the rules can be removed, and I talk about this in other forms, if the rules can be removed, then that means they are a lie. That means they are made up. That means that they come from society, which means they are not real. They hold no weight. And we have made them to create supremacy. We've made them to create, you know, a form around a person to make us comfortable, but none of it is real. Because if you can remove it and it still is good, then it's not real.
That's a good one. That's so good. I can relate to that in the sense of even dressing for work because I am in a leadership role in my company, and the expectation I had of myself for a long time was that I needed to be essentially like a man in
Mhm.
the way that I showed up, because that's what's my societal programming had taught me. Like, you want to go be the boss, you're an owner, you want to go show up as an owner. Well, you wear pants and you don't be overly feminine. Don't wear sparkles. Don't wear this, the big flowy skirt. Show up and be serious and, leave your emotions behind. All of those pieces that I would say are what I thought that I should be like. And within the past few years, I have dismantled that to a large degree in the sense that I feel much more confident showing up in what I feel confident in versus what that external, you know, setting that's placed on me maybe expects. Now, am I, gonna dye my hair like rainbow colored and, you know, uh, do
Watch what
some
you put out
like
there. It might
something
happen.
wild? Yeah,
You
maybe I
might.
will. I mean, that's not necessarily what I think, like, I would even want personally, but, like, if I could show up that way, like, I think my point in this goofy rant is just to basically say, like, I agree with you, the rules are what we decide they are. So, rather than painting yourself into this corner, painting yourself into this box, like, step back and really think about it. Like, what would you wanna do if that box didn't exist? And be really honest with yourself. I think, like, that's what I've been trying to challenge myself with. It's like, what what do I feel like I have to do? Like, you talk about this a lot, feeling like what you have to do versus, like, doing things with gladness of heart. Like, "Okay, I have to do this, so I'm gonna do this," and, ugh, right? And that feels sticky and feels shitty versus, "I get to do this, and this is where I get to be, and this is how I get to show up. What do I really want that to look like?" And just playing with that little nuance has been, I have to tell you, like, life changing for me. I've had such a freedom of mind that I have not had before just in that small nuance of, like, really recognizing the have to versus the I get to, or I get to, to
Just
choose how
tweaking
I'm
it.
going to show up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just tweaking it.
So small.
I'm not gonna do these dishes right now because I don't want to, and so I'm gonna wait until I'm ready to do them. Do you have to do your dishes in life? Yeah, because otherwise they're gonna overflow and you're gonna run out of shit to, put your food on. But just kind of, like, give yourself space to do it because you want to, and then I mean, look at the millennials right now. I think we're still in, like, the millennial age, right, of 25s. So they kind of walked away from suit, tie, wingtip shoes, sensible, masculine black socks, right? And now they wear the Cole Haan white bottom, gym shoe-esque, no
Very.
sock, short pant, tight suit, they look like they're right out of, like, Paris, right? Or, like, New York City, and it's super, like, instead of the oversized suit, black pinstripe, and so they have redefined, "This is what I'm comfortable in. This is what I wanna wear to work wear to work. I have to walk from the train a mile to my office, and this makes sense to me." And then guess who's now wearing the Cole Haan white bottom sensible, quote, unquote, "gym shoe, dress shoes" is the 50-year-olds.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I still think
Blowing
that the
up.
yeah, and so it's like, my husband's never gonna, not wear socks just because, and he'll probably still but he's now wearing the, like, almost like an athleisure-ly, like, dress pant, like that different fabric,
Material. Yeah.
like like the Lululemon kind of pant, as long as it's in blue or black, you can't really tell that it's that athletic fabric, but if we took Jim and put him back 20 years, he would be inappropriately dressed. Why do you have white bottoms? So that's the thing. All of this fluidity proves that these are choices and decisions and labels and boxes that we are deciding are appropriate or inappropriate. And
Mhm.
what they're trying to do right now, it feels to me, is put people back inside the box that is in line with rules and regulations of normalcy, of white supremacy, and Christian ideologies. Or you could even say,
Just control in
religious,
general.
yeah, religious.
I think it's just control in general,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, like, you have to look and be like, "Why does it matter? Why does anything that I'm doing make you uncomfortable?" And I remember, like, when I got my mohawk, the fear, the overwhelming fear to show up anywhere where people had not seen me yet, of how far outside of the box I had jumped.
Mm,
How far outside of it is social norm for a housewife in the suburbs to appear,
yeah.
and I had jumped off the cliff of social norms of housewife in the suburbs. And then on top of that, I would go to these, hair salons and they would give me this whacked out cut. I just decided to start going to a barbershop. Now take me and put me in a barbershop in the suburbs where all the men are getting their hair cut. And now I'm getting my hair cut at a barbershop. The the angst of sitting in that barbershop to get my hair literally with clippers buzzed on the sides brought me so outside of my comfort zone. Even thinking about it right now brings up a reaction. And all it is a building where men primarily get their hair cut. But it is creating such a response, visceral response inside of me, emotional response inside of me to step outside of what I am supposed to be and do and look like, and the places I'm supposed to go to get my hair cut. Just because 'cause I'm going to a different building, think about that, how much that box, what a stronghold that has on each of us. Like, there's this gal on TikTok, and I think she's a prosecutor. Pretty sure she's a prosecutor. She could be a defense attorney, but I'm not sure. But she's gotta be a head prosecutor because I remember that in my mind, she was in charge. And she literally wears latex to court. Latex skirts, like bustier, bras underneath with the latex sport coat and like skull and crossbone chokers, black hair, she's a freaking like county prosecutor. And even watching her talk about her court cases and talk about her this and that in the legal system, my brain so I'm a person who's very outside of the box, and even watching her, I am judging going, "I don't think that's appropriate for court." Think how stupid. But so, like, you know what I mean? So, like, even as open-minded as I am, I still get angst thinking about walking into a barber shop, getting my head shaved, by a barber. Even watching a woman on a video wearing latex, and she's talking about going to court today in front of a judge, and she's got like skulls on her necklace and wearing latex and leather. And I'm like, she's dressed inappropriately. So, like, it still lives in me, just like
Yeah.
every other judgment and stuff like that. But I mean, it's ingrained in us.
Well, and it's interesting too because I've heard the reason so if you think about it, like, where does this come from, right? So, they say that the reason that we are so hardwired as humans to not want to be ousted, right? Like, not want to be rejected is because we had to literally live in community with each other, going back generations and generations and generations. If you were ostracized, and we might have already had this conversation, but if you were ostracized, you were literally dead. Like you could not survive by yourself without your tribe. So
Yeah.
we are so hardwired to the point where our reptilian brain thinks that we are going to actually die. Like actually die if somebody rejects us. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think everyone can relate to that. The feeling of rejection is a horrible feeling and we're hardwired to not want to feel it. which makes us want to conform. And now that we're in a space where it's no longer necessary to do that from a survival standpoint, that still lives in us. Like that is still part of our brain. So I just, to think about it from that perspective, like having those feelings of rejection and how like I'm like sweating even like thinking about it, like it makes you so nervous
It's
to
not
think
easy.
about being fully rejected by your people, right? Like it's a horrible, lonely, terrible feeling. Like it's scary.
And we watched that in middle school. I mean, that is like,
Yeah.
we really see, like, if you go sit in front of a middle school or high school and the kids come out at the end of the day, out the doors, they literally all look like clones. They all have the white above the ankle Nike socks, white gym shoes, Lululemon or sweatpants or what, like they literally all look like they're coming out of some sort of camp where they have to dress a certain way because they are all, and like the other day, Emerson was graduating and I'm like, you know, here's some necklaces to look at. And this was really cute when it said like LOVE with like the little beads in between, like just a cheapie, but it was cute. She's like, do you have anything that's just like gold? I'm like, you mean like everyone else is going to wear? She's like,
Mm.
yes, like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like she's like, I just want to blend, mom. I want to look nice and blend.
Yeah.
Like there's degrees of stepping outside, but it is only a very small degree, and if you think about, like, I remember some conversations that you and I had of what it feels like to do that thing and step outside,
Yeah.
right? And the conversations of, well, like, are people gonna judge me? And I'm like, yeah, but what if you're the inspiration and everyone is just sitting there with bated breath to do the exact same thing you're doing? And then you step outside the box and everyone goes, oh, thank God. Thank
Yeah.
God she's doing the thing.
Creating a new normal or blazing a path. And that also makes me think, right? So, especially with women, I think we typically tend to look at someone and say, "Oh my God, look at her! Look what she's doing," and we have this feeling of resentment or like, yeah, like resentment, I guess. And then I think you sent it to me, or someone sent it to me, that resentment actually lives in the jealousy category. So you're pushing someone away. You're excluding them in some way, being negative towards them because you really want to be able to do what they're doing deep down.
Mhm.
And I think that's so interesting because it's like we don't want to be rejected. Like the person that's in that space, we don't want to be rejected for being outside of the box. But in doing that, we get rejected to a certain level, but at the same time, like what you're saying is like that person that's looking at you really actually does want to be able to do what you're doing, but they're too fucking scared to be able to do what you're doing.
Well, it makes me think of, like, the dance floor, right? And so you and your girlfriends are in a corner, maybe drinking your champagne or whatever, and then there's this, like, one rogue girl from another group that goes out on the dance floor and just starts flailing about and just dancing to the music, and then you and your little bitchy girlfriends are like, "Oh my god, like, look at her flail, like, she looks like an idiot, like, who would wear that? Like, oh my god," like, like, and you just
Yeah,
start your, like, bitchy judgment type thing. All the while, every freaking one of you are like, "That looks kind of fun."
I
Like, I
wish I,
wish we were out there. Like, it'd be way
yeah,
better than standing here judging and drinking champagne and or whatever. Like, that looks really fun. But then once you guys have all agreed that that individual dancing is an idiot, who
is
the
outside the
hell is
box.
going to leave that group and also then go dance? So that judgment in that moment is not only resentment and jealousy, right? It's also showing insecurity, but it's also maintaining control over the group.
Mm,
Because if we
yeah,
judge her and everyone in the group listens, who's going to jump outside of that box knowing full well that you're next on the shooting range? Think about that. So, inside of this little moment of micro macro, right? If we all listen in a group that people that step outside the norm are idiots and look stupid, and, you know, we don't wanna hang out with them, and they're not cool, and aren't we so much cooler, right? So think of that in any scenario. We are the norm, we are good, that person stepping outside of the box is bad,
Mhm.
okay? The information shared in that group is infiltrated into everyone's head that if I also step outside the box, I will be judged and ostracized. So it
Yep.
maintains control amongst the group to judge anyone that steps outside of the box at any time, right? So even in this like this vision of this girl dancing, but if a group of women are told, like, if you work outside of the home, you're not a good mother. So
Mhm.
then any women that want to work outside the home who also happen to have children already have the programming that working outside of the home is being a bad mother,
Yeah.
right?
Such a good example.
So we can micro and macro that all day long. If you wear if you wear latex to work, you are like and it goes like if you wear short shorts, if you show your breasts, if you cut your hair short, you are against the norm. We are going to judge you and talk about you on social media, on TV, whatever the thing is in whatever setting. And so we recognize by way of that programming, by way of that conversation that stepping outside of the box is dangerous and you will end up alone.
Yeah.
So don't do it. Don't do it.
I wonder why I feel like this is such a call right now. You know, like I wonder like if you're able to like check in on that. Why is this such a call right now for us to dismantle all of that? Because I feel really much I really feel like that like the yarn is unraveling, you
Mhm.
know. I mean, and you just look back. If you look back at the speed in which this has happened, if you kind of like, widen the lens of history and look back, like it's happening faster and faster and faster.
And we're finding out about it by way of social media, right? Like
Right.
it's we
The
have that
information
constant
there.
information
Yeah.
influx of what others are doing that we would have never known even 3 years ago, 5 years ago. What they keep bringing me back to throughout our conversation is Joan of Arc.
Badass. Sorry.
I
That's the first thing that comes to
mean,
mind.
I like just think. But when I look at Joan of Arc, what they just showed me when you said, "I'd like you to check in on this." When I look at her, they're like, that's the end all be all, stepping away from all norms of the three-dimensional human construct of living inside of the quote matrix, if you will, where she had completely and wholly stepped out of any rules, any belief systems, any preconceived notions. She had completely stepped outside of the belief that any of this shit matters. Like she had stepped into her spiritual self 100,000% and owned it. And so, like, when I'm looking at those moments of anything from me getting my, mohawk haircut to like I have a tattoo on my hand and down my spine. Like those are like little tiny toe ins. Like, do you believe the bullshit? No, I
Mhm.
don't. Do you believe? And then like I was driving with my girlfriend the other day and I'm like, I'm so obsessed with my like my love tattoo on my hand. And she's like, it's really cute for you. And I get what she's saying. That's not for me, i.e. her. But then I like you feel yourself then teeter like, did I make a mistake? Is it too much?
Mhm.
And then you're like, fuck that shit. Like I'm obsessed with it. Like I love it. I'm not
Yeah.
going to believe the bullshit. So like as we're stepping into this, I believe that it's almost as if the universe at this time is challenging each and every one of us in that do you believe in man-made shit, or do you believe in spirit and yourself and your soul and your expansiveness, your creatorness? What are you gonna pick? Like like, I think it's the Jewish religion that says if you get a tattoo, you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery, right? I have 3 tattoos on my body that are there at this moment that are because I had radiation. They have to tattoo you in, like, 3 or 4 spots, which the other day, Jim saw it. He goes, "Oh my god, I think your tattoo artist made a mistake because there's, like, this weird dot over here next to your back tattoo." And I was like, "That's from radiation, you whack job." He's like, "Oh, I thought she just, like, dabbed you by accident."
Little dab.
I'm like, "Little dab would do you right in the back, just a little period in the middle of your back." But I mean, like, think of all like, how deep and I'm thinking about you right now, Alison McGuire.
Okay.
How
I like that.
deep are you going to believe the bullshit that keeps you stuck inside of rules that do are not real, that are keeping you inside of a box, inside of fear, lack inside of lack of expression, lack of awakening, lack of fully loving yourself and all that you're capable of because you're sitting inside of a space of fear that is based on absolutely nothing that has to do with you.
I mean,
I mean
we need that on record to listen to every morning before I walk out the door.
I
I
think
feel
we need a
like
whole product line of just Joan of Arc.
yeah.
That's how
The
focused this is right now.
the vision when you say Joan of Arc and when you were talking about it, I mean, I was literally getting, like, full body chills. I don't know why, but even, like, I am not even like, I can't even tell you that I know her whole story, but
Right.
that her persona, the energy of her persona is so powerful. So powerful.
It's so powerful. It's like, it's this big F you to everything. You will not define me. Society will not define me. My breasts and my vagina will not define me. Not fear will not define me. Death will not define me. None of it. None of it. And guess what? When she incorporated that fully, because when I look at her energy, it wasn't even courageous. It was a stepping into existence. It was
Mhm.
stepping into self that had always been there. Pay attention to that. She stepped into the self that had always been there, but she decided to fully step in and own it. So the you that is in existence already, that is outside of the norms and rules that are in existence, that you already exists, Allison. And so it's waiting for you, right? That you is waiting for you to decide, am I courageous? Am I willing to have fun? Am I willing to let go? Am I willing to stop looking at this dimensional 3D reality around me that I'm using to define something that isn't true, right? And so when I look at the Joan of Arc energy, it's like she stepped into her God power in
Yeah.
in those these moments that we can envision in our head of who Joan of Arc is. It was a huge fuck you to all the laws, all the rules, all the norms. It was a fuck you to the belief systems and allowing anything to define her. Anything.
I think the nuance here too that I keep thinking about is the difference between doing something to be rebellious because you're angry and it's not necessarily in full alignment with yourself
Mhm.
versus tapping in. And sometimes I think that has to be the first step just because it's like easier to do that than to do it from a place of like peace and like, hey, this is just like actually who I am and I'm gonna like love and own this space and just be me versus like I'm gonna go to work today and I'm gonna wear, like a crazy purple skin suit, right? Like whatever, some
Right.
wild thing that maybe I don't really want to wear, but I'm doing it as a rebellion. That versus saying like, okay, checking in with myself and saying, well, what would it make me feel at my best today? What would
Mhm.
make me feel my most authentic, best, highest most expression of me and choosing that, right? So, like, I think that those 2 pieces can get a little bit muddled when you're on this journey. I can say that from personal experience. And I've noticed the difference between the rebellion and then the falling back into, like, the comfort zone of, like, this feels like me. This feels authentic. This feels real. This feels like I'm not doing this against someone else, but I'm doing it for me. If
Yeah,
that
it's like when I'm looking at it, it's like there's like when you're in the versus mentality, there's like static and gravel. It's like I'm just standing, you know,
Yeah,
which which could be this the like kind of like
be a catalyst, I
yeah,
think.
like a little catalyst, like a little toe in, like I'm going to do this, screw them, right? Like I'm going to do this because you might need that fire to
Yes,
step out of the box. You might need a little like screw you worker friends,
like
screw
an energy
you.
push.
Yeah, like suburban housewives that are going to judge me. Like you might have to amp yourself up and that might feel like rebellion, but to me it's the whisper that calls that's on the other side of that rebellion that you're getting to,
Yeah,
right? It's the I'm going over there. And also, P.S., these things that we're talking about are not harmful. These are not based in, well, screw you, I'm going to drink 3 bottles of wine tonight, or I'm going to do drugs, or I'm going to drive fast, or whatever. They're not based inside of like dangerous behaviors. They're based inside of stepping into yourself, right? Like, because that's different, and it might feel like rebellion because you are rebelling against the norm. You're the idiot out there dancing. So
right.
you might feel like, "Screw you, little clique over in the corner drinking champagne. I'm going to dance in spite of you." So there's going to be a versus that happens at the maybe initial, but
Yeah,
then, like, once it's there, then you can feel like, "Okay, no, I was getting to this place, I had to go over that hump and break out of what I've always shown up as." Like, I remember when like I said, the couple times I showed up with my mohawk, which is, it's a moment, right, in suburbia, and my girlfriend called it the haircut heard round the world. Like, that's how out of the box I stepped, right? And so there is a part of it that has to versus societal norms, but you need to make sure that it's in line with your spirit and where you want to head or how it's going to like bloom, right?
yeah,
How is this blooming inside of me? Why is this blooming? Like, what is it that I truly want? And I just find it fascinating when we are sitting here today pushing against all of these things and playing with it, how much there is a possibility of expansion and freedom and awareness and loving yourself. Because I do think that not stepping into the dance floor creates self-hatred and low
mhm,
self-esteem and depression and anxiety because you might be the person that's sitting with those girls going, "Yeah, she's an asshole." And all the while you're like, "God, I wish I could go dance with her." And that's gonna create, depression and anxiety and sadness, and you're gonna get home and you just stood there all night, and then you lay in bed and you're like, "I would have given anything to go dance." Like, think about the ramifications of not following what you want based on society or your group or your neighborhood or being a woman or being a man or whatever it is. Think about how many of us, you know, that are here during this podcast, how often we don't go dance.
yeah, that is a great point. I heard someone say once the power of not making choices is so much heavier and long lasting than the choices you do make because I think we're programmed to be afraid to do the thing, not to be afraid to not do it. But what you're saying is, what about the not doing? What about the
Mhm.
not following?
Yeah.
Where does that lead you? Where does that take you? And I think that's a concept worth really thinking about and really diving deep on.
Yeah, I think we should talk about maybe like next week, let's talk about stuff like I call it my Lady Gaga, right? Like, everyone told her not to wear the meat suit, and she wore the meat suit, and it, like, exploded her career. Like, she was on the floor doing the dance, like, she was dancing. And I love that visual because I know all of us have been in that moment of being too cool for school and standing in the corner and not dancing. And I think that actually dancing has been a very reoccurring theme since I've discovered my mediumship that dead people show up all the time and say, just dance. So I think there's something to that idea of like, just go dance, say yes, go do the thing, whatever the thing is, at least you won't die going, God, I really wish I would have danced. I wish I would have started the business. I wish I would have, you know, skydived or whatever that thing that's calling you. But you look at your friends and they're like, oh my God, that sounds down bad. Like, that's not a way to live. So
Yeah.
I think we should touch on this again next week.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's do it.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here again with my partner in crime, Allison McGuire, bringing all the hot topics, and we will see you here again next week. Thanks for listening. If you would like to connect on a more personal level, head over to meredithwillits.com or on Instagram at Meredith with a Y for behind the scene footage and outtakes. Please subscribe and come back each week for more Meredith with a Y. Thanks again for listening. Cheers.